Hey everyone, Chris Salvatierra here with a video about the informational resources that people use every day in Hollywood. By the end of this video, you should have a clear sense of how Hollywood gets its info and where you can go to educate yourself and stay updated. The great news is that virtually all of this stuff is online, so even if you're not in Los Angeles, you can avail yourself of this material. Some of it's free, some of it costs money, and I will break that down for you. But no matter what aspect of the business you plan to occupy, whether you're a writer, director, aspiring producer, cinematographer, future executive, in my opinion, it's vital to at least have a basic understanding of the business and to stay current on what's happening in the business. So just for clarity, I'm going to group the sites / blogs, etc. into three categories: news, reference, and miscellaneous. News being the more newsfeed update type of information, reference being the more databasey information. I'm going to petition to get that word into Webster's, and miscellaneous being just what it sounds like. First, it might be helpful to go back a few years and provide some context, because what's happened in our business regarding information is pretty much what's happened everywhere as the digital age has made everything a 24-hour cycle. Before the digital age, in the olden days, it used to be that subscribers would get hard copies of what were called the trades, specifically Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, every day. The news about the business was therefore only as current as what had happened before press time that morning or day before, just like the newspaper business. Most people would, and many still do, get their trades delivered to their office or their home. If you were in an office with a bunch of people, sometimes to save money you'd have to share the trades, and you could tell how low on the totem pole you were by how late in the day you got your trades. In 2001, this woman, Nikki Fink, started writing a column for LA Weekly called Deadline Hollywood. She's famously private, and there are very few pictures of her. In fact, this is the only picture I know of her. The LA Weekly column then went online in 2006 as a blog, and then in 2007, disaster hit. The writers went on strike, and the town ground to a halt. Now think about it, if no one's writing anything, really nothing is moving forward. So virtually everyone was at a standstill waiting on news of the strike. It went on for 3 months, which was awful for everyone except perhaps Nikki Fink. She was able to provide real-time updates on her blog, which is exactly what everyone needed. Her readership tripled, and Deadline Hollywood became a staple of everyone's diet. People loved her combination of authentic, credible information and quote-unquote snark. Fink is famously caustic, and readers could and still can leave comments without having to identify themselves, which incidentally I find cowardly and awful and the scourge of our society, but that would be for my diary if I had one. In 2009, Deadline was bought by a group called PMC, which not so ironically owns Variety. Fink had a dispute with the company and left, and I know that a lot of people miss her personality, which was infused throughout Deadline Hollywood. She's technically on Twitter right now, but I believe there's some sort of a gag order based on her settlement with PMC. But the website and the mechanism and information of Deadline Hollywood remains, and all the trades now try to provide real-time information. Now it's about who gets the story first. So now things have settled down, so to speak. Variety and The Reporter are online with free, as in ad-supported versions. Deadline Hollywood is free. Another competing site is called The Wrap, which is founded by Sharon Waxman, who wrote about Hollywood for the Washington Post and the New York Times. So one can get a lot of free information online. As with most newspapers that are now online, the trades, i.e. Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, still exist in print. The other four shown here do not. Now, as you can see here, there are various subscription rates, print and digital, which I believe means that one can look at the issue digitally as a PDF, not necessarily on the website. If one is living in Los Angeles and is really desperate to hold the trades in one's hand, they have these things called libraries, and most libraries will have the trades there. Another free industry site is called IndieWire, which, as one would imagine, is more about independent film in spirit. And there's a blog on there that a lot of people like called The Playlist. And then there's Studio System News, which is free, and I saved for last because it's linked to Studio System, the granddaddy of Hollywood databases, which leads us into our next category. Now we move to the reference, more databasey type of sites. I'm just going to keep pretending that's a word. Studio System is owned by a company called Baseline. Before the internet, companies in Hollywood would pay thousands of dollars, and the Studio System crew would come in and literally install the software on individual computers or servers. And it was a vital lifeline. One could look up almost anything from a project in development to everything in pre-production to what agency repped a certain writer. Studio System, as you would imagine, is now online, though I've not used it since the old days when it was software on the computer. It's still used by many big companies in Hollywood, studios, agencies, etc., and many consider it to be the most comprehensive available. That being said, it's still very, very expensive. However, in doing my research for this video, I found that Studio System offers a more reasonable version for individual users called In Hollywood. They have different options for writers and directors as well as producers. You can see the fees here. It's still not incredibly inexpensive, but not as expensive as Studio System. I don't have an exact quote for Studio System, but I believe it's in the thousands. So this, for writers and directors, as you can see here, it's $5 a day, $19.95 a month, or $199 a year. That includes information on development, production, company contact info, representation. For producers, it's $59.95 a month or $499 a year, which then the monthly is down to $41.58. And that includes the other stuff that I just mentioned, plus casting and below the line. Now for what I use as an independent producer, IMDb Pro. I'm sure you've heard of IMDb, which is owned by Amazon. IMDb Pro is just what it sounds like. It's a database for professionals who need more info. Now let's take a look so you can get a sense of how they compare. I've pulled up a record of Jennifer Lawrence. As you can see here, there is a lot of information, especially about Snickers, but also about Jennifer Lawrence, bio information, photos, credits, even movies that have not been released yet. Projects in development over here, which I will talk about in a few seconds. But there is a lot of information that doesn't exist on IMDb proper. If you go over to IMDb Pro, though, there is a lot more information. So let's take a look. So as you can see here, there is, there's representative information, contact info. You can even send an email to her agent's spam folder. And as you can see here, there are projects that are still in development, such as East of Eden. This is something that IMDb doesn't have. In fact, if you see projects in development on IMDb and you click through, it then says you have to have a subscription to IMDb Pro. So for instance, East of Eden is a project technically in development, meaning it's being developed or written. The director is Gary Ross. He's adapting Steinbeck's novel. It is not yet slated for production, so that is not something that would be accessible on IMDb. And for instance, since there aren't development projects on IMDb, you wouldn't be able to look up a writer who's not yet been produced. But as you can see here on IMDb Pro, you can. Now, I've used IMDb Pro for several years, and I haven't been disappointed. I bet that if I tried Studio System, I'd be blown away. But I find IMDb Pro to be a good, affordable compromise. At $15.95 a month, which if you pay for a year, it takes it down to just over $10 a month. It's a good value for what one gets. Now over to miscellaneous. There are lots of sites out there. I just want to highlight a few. The Hollywood Journal, created by a former longtime CIA agent, Jill Cutler, is a good site for some tips from insiders, how to be a good assistant, people's first jobs, notable quotes, that kind of thing. John August, a well-known screenwriter with credits like Go, Charlie's Angels, and Dark Shadows, has created a blog that has really become very robust. He's teamed up now with another writer, Craig Mazin, who wrote a couple of the Scary Movies, Identity Thief, The Hangover 2, and they've created a really cool site geared towards writers, but is really great for anyone in the business, full of stuff like podcasts and apps by which to read screenplays. I enjoy this site, The Dissolve, which is sort of a film lover site that both aggregates content from around the web and through a small staff of writers creates its own content, interviews, reviews, think pieces, podcasts, etc. Speaking of stuff for film lovers, Cinephilia and Beyond is just awesome. It's a site that aggregates all kinds of film content. I follow it on Twitter, and I'm constantly seeing cool things like rare photos of Kubrick, Wilder, etc. And just to self-promote for a beat, you can follow me on Twitter at Chris Salvaterra, Salvaterra. I follow all this stuff myself, and I throw up things that I think are really interesting. Now, how the hell do you keep track of all this stuff? Most of you watching this video are probably more tech savvy than I, but I've found something that works for me, which is called TweetDeck. It's an app for the computer and also for iPhone and iPad, but I use it mostly on the computer. And I follow all of the entities that I've talked about on Twitter and am able to access or look at them on a sort of dashboard type of column on TweetDeck. So I can just scroll through everything and see what's interesting, what's not, what's repetitive and what's not, because as you would imagine, the trades will often be reporting the same stories. Okay, so takeaways and to-dos. First off, the news feed and free type of sites, Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter. Secondly, the reference/database sites, Studio System, In Hollywood, IMDb Pro. There's a lot you can get for free. The good news then is if you're short on cash, you can still learn a ton about the business without even leaving your computer. If anyone's asking my opinion regarding whether to spend money and how much, here are my 2 cents. If you have limited funds and perhaps are thinking about spending money on one thing, I wouldn't get a trades print or digital subscription. Certainly with a subscription, there are certain things that you will get, as in like Weekly Variety, Weekly Hollywood Reporter, that you won't be able to access online. But I still think you can just go on the online and access the trades. If you're going to spend money on anything and you want to dig into information you might be reading about online, I'd recommend IMDb Pro. $15.95 a month, $10.41 if you pay for a year. That way you can have that much more information at your fingertips, and you can toggle between the stuff that's free and IMDb Pro. So for instance, if you read an article that doesn't have all the information or context that you want, you can go over to IMDb Pro and fill in those gaps. You can get to know the agencies, the individual agents and their clients, for instance. And you will start to get a sense of both the minutia and the big picture of the business, which I think is extremely important. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and look for more videos.